to the podcast where two longtime friends and sometimes a guest talk about their favorite games from the perspective of an average player. My name is Andrew Kimball.
And I'm Dylan Wren, and we are your friendly neighborhood gamers.
I hear you're gonna come back after I kill you, so we're in for lots of fun.
Thanks for checking out this episode of the podcast. If that didn't give it away, we're talking about Shadow of War and Shadow of Mordor. Dylan's here with me. Dylan, how's it going?
Not too bad. Hey, people.
Hey, people.
Hey, people.
You excited to talk about this? I guess it's a series of games. It's only two, but...
Yeah. They're a fun little series of games, and in the Lord of the Rings universe, ecosystem, whatever.
We're going to talk about that. That's a big talking point for these games. It's kind of like what they did with that lore / to that lore. And a lot of people were not happy about what they did to the J.R.R. Tolkien universe, but
meh.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get into it. I kind of view it as like either an alternate reality or just, fun stories within that universe, which I'm happy to explore. But it's not just the two of us tonight. We're bringing back friend of the show, special guest, my baby brother, Braedon Kimball.
Happy to be here with my fellow man swine.
Yeah. So I started doing this thing, or I want to do this thing. This will, depending on when this comes out.
Yeah.
I want to open the episodes, since we don't have I don't do the intro live. I want to open them with a quote.
There's a little peek behind the curtains.
Yeah. I want to open them with a little quote or something from the game, or something you hear that and you're like, oh yeah, like the cake is a lie for Portal would be a pretty obvious one. But when I was looking up quotes for this series, it's the stuff the orcs say to you is probably the most memorable thing. So Man Swine seemed like a good place to go to, and it got an interesting reaction from you guys, so it seemed to work. Hopefully the listeners appreciate it.
Yes. It's a shame it isn't a video podcast, so you could see Braedon fight his hot chocolate down as you said it.
Yeah. But listeners, thanks again for checking it out, listening, and before we dive into this one, we are going to be spoiling these at least
the whole 4 to 5 year old games.
Yes, and maybe even the movies. Who knows where we're going to go, but yeah, nothing is off limits. We may try to kind of structure things a little bit where we're talking more about overall feelings about the game and gameplay and things like that first, and then diving into the story a little bit closer to the back half, but we're not sticking to a strict structure about that. And like Dylan said, these games are pretty old. I know Shadow of War is on Game Pass.
Yeah.
Shadow of War was... Wait, no. Shadow of War is the second game, right?
Yeah.
Shadow of Mordor was 2014. Shadow of War was 2017, I think. So
yeah.
They're 5 years plus.
So if you're listening to an episode based on these games, you probably have played / beat them. So,
or you're at least aware of them
and
know that they're old.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to start this off just by reading a little bit of info about these games, kind of talking about what they are, and then we're going to go into our thoughts and opinions. So, Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor is a 2014 action-adventure video game developed by Monolith Productions and produced by Warner Bros. Interactive Entertainment. An original story based on the Legendarium created by J.R.R. Tolkien, the game takes place between the events of The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings film trilogies, or books. The player controls Talion, a Gondorian ranger who bonds with the wraith of the elf lord Celebrimbor, as the two set out to avenge the deaths of their loved ones. Players can engage in melee combat and use wraith abilities to fight and manipulate enemies. The game introduces the Nemesis system, which allows the artificial intelligence of non-playable characters to remember their prior actions against the game's protagonist and react accordingly. The game was released for Windows, PlayStation 4, Xbox One in September 2014, and PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 in November 2014. I didn't realize there was that big of a gap
I didn't either.
between the releases.
Yeah.
Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor received critical acclaim upon release. Most praise was directed at its combat, open-world design, and the Nemesis system.
Mm-hmm.
Some criticism was aimed at the game's story and boss battles. Shadow of Mordor marked the biggest launch for a game based upon Tolkien's universe and would go on to win several awards from video gaming publications, including Game of the Year in 2015. So, before I go on reading about the sequel, anything that like jumps out to you guys on that one based on that little blurb there?
I just recall how groundbreaking the Nemesis system was.
Mm-hmm.
It was the first time I'd ever seen anything that involved.
Yeah. Like it really kind of, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more, but it really did kind of lend itself to making that game special.
It was the hook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the combat and the traversal and everything was very much
Just action RPG.
borrowed
kind of
from
game.
other series. It was very Assassin's Creed / Batman Arkham.
Yeah.
Like and it felt good. It worked well, but without that Nemesis system, it really would probably have been a very forgettable, just like action game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess I didn't realize it had gone up for Game of the Year either. I know they sold a Game of the Year edition, but I didn't realize that it was like actually had won a Game of the Year.
2014 was one of those years that was pretty light. I remember Shadow of Mordor being one of the more high-profile games, which kind of tells you,
Yeah.
you know, that was
Because
kind of a
2015
lighter year.
was a big year.
That was
like
The Witcher and Bloodborne.
yeah.
And a few others. So then the sequel, Middle-earth: Shadow of War, also an action role-playing game developed by Monolith. It was released worldwide for Microsoft, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One on October 10th, 2017. Shadow of War continues the previous game's narrative, which is based on J.R.R. Tolkien's Legendarium, and set between The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, just like the first game. You continue the story of the Ranger Talion and the spirit elf lord Celebrimbor, who shares Talion's body as they forge a new ring of power to amass an army to fight against Sauron. The game builds upon the Nemesis system introduced in Shadow of Mordor, allowing Talion to gain followers from several races of Middle-earth, including Uruks and Ologs, and plan out complex strategies using these to complete missions. Shadow of War had a generally positive reaction from critics, albeit more mixed than its predecessor. Praise was aimed towards the gameplay and an improved Nemesis system, although story elements and changes made to established characters received some negative reactions, as well as the inclusion of microtransactions and loot boxes. A free-to-play companion game for iOS and Android devices was also released in July 2018. So
So in July 2018, they removed all of those microtransactions.
Oh, yeah. I completely realized there were two more lines there on the next page. Yeah,
Yep.
in July 2018, they removed all the microtransactions from the console and PC versions, and the following year it announced that the mobile version will no longer be available to play.
Mm-hmm.
So they kind of did a mini Star Wars Battlefront.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't play that game at launch, so by the time I got to it, there were no microtransactions. I didn't even realize that was a thing.
I don't remember them being super egregious.
No. It was more so for like online play, if I remember correctly, because a big part of that game initially was that you could take over these like strongholds and then you could go raid other people's strongholds online. And so if you wanted to, I think you got some like something like in-game currency or something for success, like if your group would successfully defend. And so like they sold loot boxes that essentially had orcs in them. You could get some like legendary orcs in the loot boxes, and that was how you could more ideally defend your castle or whatever, because you had the orcs with all like the immunities and whatever.
So there was a Clash of Clans micro game basically inside of
A little bit, but it was still like ultimately
was it passive or were you there when they would?
You weren't there when they would attack. I think you were only attacking, if I'm remembering correctly. But ultimately, like Talion is still the one. You are still controlling the person who is attacking. So it's not like it was completely game breaking, but I never remember being bothered by the microtransactions, but also like I didn't really mess around with that a ton.
Yeah.
I think it was more so the end game
Yeah.
was the Shadow Wars or something, which I think made you do a bunch of online stuff a bit more. And I think that was what some people didn't like, is because it was easier to get through if you did the loot boxes than it was without the loot boxes. But I didn't make it all the way through the Shadow Wars until they took them out and changed how the end game worked. So
I was going to say, that was about where I stopped playing. And then, I haven't gone back after they patched things up. But that's kind of a good transition into our experience with this game, because like Braedon mentioned, he didn't play it at launch. I think you and I both probably played it at launch or close to it.
Yeah, probably. Because, I would imagine that it coming out in 2017, I probably was playing it pretty much at launch.
Yeah, same.
I don't exactly remember when I got it, but I think I remember playing it at the same time as you, and I don't think we would have gotten it way late.
No, and I remember being excited for it because I really enjoyed Shadow of Mordor, which was kind of not like an underdog, I guess, but just it was kind of like the Arkham Asylum thing where it's like, oh, this game is actually really good.
Yeah.
Not just, oh, this is fun because I like the property that they based this mediocre game on. Like the Nemesis system had a lot to do with that, but it was also really well polished. The action, for lack of a better word, felt very visceral. Like just the lopping off of heads and limbs and hacking through orcs. You felt like Aragorn, and it was amazing.
It was very stylish.
Yes.
The combat was a lot of fun.
It looked impressive, which even though you know by the end you had kind of mastered it and you were doing counters and whatnot really simply and easily, it still looked very impressive. I will say that the difficulty curve in that game initially was pretty steep for me in the first one, where I felt like I was just getting wrecked constantly. And then once you start leveling up and getting abilities and figuring out how to utilize the like ghost elf powers, you can just wreck.
Yeah, the first half of the first game, you're leaning into the stealth aspects a lot more. But as you get more powerful, you're able to just like walk out in the open and fight for an hour without stopping.
Yeah. Because a big part of the loop in the first game was it would set up, okay, you've got to fight these lieutenants or whatever,
or like
captains, and then captains, and then you can fight like the boss of the zone or something like that. Yeah. You didn't have to fight all the lieutenants. You could just go in and fight the boss, and then the lieutenants would fight up during the boss, or would show up during the boss battle. And so like the first few that you fight, you like go in there and you like take out the lieutenants one by one, and then you go after like the boss of the zone. And then by the end of the game, it's like you can just walk in there and be like, I'm going to take all of you on at once. I don't care. I don't need it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The first game, I feel like I played, it was definitely in that launch year because I played it before The Witcher.
Yeah.
And I feel like it was my game that year where it's what I was playing when I had free time.
Yeah.
I remember I had pretty recently just moved out of my parents' house and was kind of on my own. And so I was playing a lot of that game. Braedon, did you play it in that kind of launch year? Do you remember?
I'm trying.
And did you play it on 360 or the Xbox One? Because those were different games.
Definitely played it on the One. I never played it on 360.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to remember if it was. I think I borrowed your copy.
Okay, so you probably played it.
So I probably played it with at least
later.
A year later.
Yeah. I played it on both. I think I got the 360 version for Christmas that year, and then I had to take a class that January or something. And so when I wasn't in class, I 100%ed that game during that few weeks before the semester started back up.
Pro gamer over here.
And then
you got the one version, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember you texting me or telling me and being like, this is a different game.
Yeah. The Nemesis system really, they had a version of it in the 360 game.
But the console just wasn't powerful enough to really fully pull it off. Yeah.
And so going into the Xbox One version of it, it was a lot more fleshed out. Because I probably didn't really play a ton of Shadow of Mordor before getting into Shadow. Like, I played the 360 version all the way through, and it wasn't until after Shadow of War came out that I went back and played the Xbox One version of Shadow of Mordor. So for me, the jump from like Nemesis system and everything that you could do in the 360 version to Shadow of War was massive. Like, I remember texting, like Andrew was saying, texting him about just some of the like things that the Nemesis system was doing, and he was like, yeah, it kind of did that in the old game too, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, not in mine.
So let's talk about kind of our first general impressions of these games. We'll start with Shadow of Mordor. We've talked about how much we loved, like we enjoyed it. We played the crap out of it when we played them. But for me, I guess as an example, I think that the opening sequence in that game like really caught me off guard and felt much more. I could see that they were trying to do something serious here and special in the story and within the world. And then once getting into that loop of finding enemies, dying to them, having them talk crap about you when you came back, or defeating them and either killing them and messing up their ranks or winning, like converting them to your side, and seeing how that all worked out. Like, once you get into the loop of the Nemesis system, that was just so addicting at that time. And I think Shadow of Mordor was truly a special game for that reason. And I'm surprised that a lot of other games haven't taken that idea and like fully ripped it off yet. I know Assassin's Creed has done some slightly similar things,
Yeah.
but it's nowhere near to the depth of Shadow of Mordor. And War improved upon it, but it's that whole thing where Shadow of Mordor was the first, and so it was like really unique and special. So like, I loved that game.
Yeah.
Playing it, going into it, like my impressions of it would be, super high. I'm curious to see where you guys were.
Yeah, I feel like mine were also definitely very high. Obviously, it was Lord of the Rings and
Right.
fantasy, and so as growing up, those were movies and the series that
Yeah, we were very much into that.
that were huge for us. And this game hit when we were at, like, if this game had come out when we were kids, like, we wouldn't have probably been allowed to play it.
Yeah.
But coming out when it did, it was like it hit right at that time where I don't know if the Hobbit movies were coming out around then or not. I don't remember when those came out.
I think the first Hobbit came out in 2012. So yeah,
Okay.
it would have
Yeah,
been.
they had been.
So it was like towards the end of the Hobbit series that was coming out.
I feel like it really fulfilled that power fantasy that like the like Return of the King game did,
Yeah.
but in a much more thoughtful and polished way. Like,
Yeah.
it felt like someone actually put care into it.
Yeah, like this was definitely like how we envisioned the Lord of the Rings Return of the King game as
Right.
children is what this game was.
Yeah, exactly.
And so already it was starting off on a bit biased for me, just because I love Lord of the Rings. Like, just getting to exist in this world and see these things was really cool. Plus, just getting to see Mordor was kind of cool, because a lot of what we have seen of Mordor in the movies was just kind of like this black rocky field,
Yeah.
and so getting to see a bunch more of it and be like, oh, like these are like little towns, and getting to understand that, yeah, Gondor and stuff used to like be up in here, and
Right.
it was interesting. Plus, like, a lot of the characters were kind of cool, and getting to see some of the, like Gollum pop up, and some of those kind of other characters, like the new ones.
Dealing with Gollum.
I mean, it was annoying
Yeah.
to an extent, but like, it's like, oh, that's Gollum. But then there were also, the newer characters, like in the first game, Ratbag.
Yeah.
And then the second game, I forget who the guy was. The like, I don't remember his name.
I think Ratbag came back.
But there was another like troll guy that like betrayed you to teach you how, like, as part of a tutorial, basically.
Right.
But he was cool too. So overall, I thought it was a really cool just story to see Lord of the Rings again in a game after years and years, and for it to be good,
Right. Yeah.
And it's one of those that I still will, like, I still haven't uninstalled Shadow of War from my Xbox because I still will go back and like mess around with it and play it just to like have fun running. Like, I'm at the point now where I can just run into a horde of orcs and just have fun
Yeah,
with
you're just
it.
blowing off steam, essentially.
Yeah.
Braedon, what about you? Your kind of general impressions on the first game, but also, the series, I guess, as a whole.
I liked the setting for a lot of the same reasons Dylan did. The first game I really enjoyed. I played it all the way through. Second game, I was not as hooked on the story. I don't know. I found the gameplay started to get repetitive. And I think that is one drawback of the Nemesis system that people don't really talk about as much, is that it does get very repetitive. So if the loop gets boring, then the game kind of gets boring.
Right.
And there's not like a lot of incentives to keep playing if you're not into the story. So in the second game, I had the ending spoiled because I don't know where I read it, but I stumbled across the ending, and this was a few years after the game came out, so I wasn't really that upset by it. But I wasn't so in love with the gameplay loop, and there were other games that I could play. So at that point, I was like, I already know how it ends, so I just kind of gave up. I think it was right before Minas Ithil Falls.
Oh, so still pretty early on.
Yeah, it was probably the first 40% of the game, 30% of the game. I was
25.
Yeah. Yeah. I was,
So, Braedon, I feel like we've talked about we've referenced the Nemesis system a lot. Why don't you explain, kind of break down what that actually was?
So it was essentially a way for the bosses to remember you, and they could become, if they beat you, they could become more powerful, and they would gain new abilities because so there were like tiers. There were the generals, and then there were the lieutenants. And early on in the game, especially in the first game, the lieutenant would just basically be an orc that had like an ability that made him a level above the regular orcs.
Mm-hmm.
And they all had names. And so you could find them on the map and they would recognize you and they would basically challenge you to a duel. And if you beat them, you would typically get some benefit from it, like an ability point or something like that. And if they beat you, they would level up as well and they would get increased abilities. And so if they beat you and you ran into them again, they would be harder to fight the next time. And sometimes if you beat them, you wouldn't kill them all the way. They would come back and they would be like missing an arm or something and be like, you thought you killed me.
Right.
And so that's one aspect of it. And then as you gain the ability to mind control them, you can infiltrate the ranks of Sauron's army essentially by having the lieutenants and generals be under your mind control. Because the game is a very hostile environment. There's there's nowhere that's safe in the game. And the only way to make it safe is to control all the orcs. So if you want to have just a stroll through Mordor, you can't do that without having the power of the ring or Celebrimbor and controlling the orcs. So yeah, I guess to put a bow tie on it, the Nemesis system is a way for the higher powered orcs to kind of grow with you as a player too. They can change and evolve just as much as Talion can.
Just hearing you explaining it makes me want to go play one of these games again. I'm like, man, that's so cool. I want to go play it.
Yeah, it was such a fun, cool system because it to me, it really helped develop like the story itself, especially of the first game. I thought was really fun.
I liked the story in the first game.
The second game, I didn't think it was as strong as the first game, but I still enjoyed it. But even outside of the story, you're going through, you're doing these things, and it's almost like organically developing too, because it's like there's that stupid orc that like
it did
killed me
so well, was just like those organic.
It ensures that every player has a kind of unique experience.
Like there was this one guy who's just named like Toothless Fleabag or something, and that is like your you just hate that guy's guts because of what's going on in your world.
Because
versus
he's got the Beastmaster
like
perk
Dylan's game, he never had a toothless flea bag, but he had something else that was, just as frustrating or as cool.
Yep. Like you'd be doing a mission, that guy would pop up
that
and be like, haha,
so
you thought you got me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like that Breath of the Wild thing where like just cool moments just kind of happen.
Yeah.
And it was all based in that Nemesis system. Yeah.
The ones that you couldn't so there was a combat ability where you could like jump over them and get behind them.
Yeah.
And the ones that wouldn't let you do that were almost always the ones that ended up killing me and would become my nemesis.
Yes.
And so they would end up being like, they'd have leveled up like 4 times and have
That's hilarious.
Because they'd learn as you went through it. So it's like if you didn't kill them, but you ran away or you defeated them, but the game like brought them back or something, and you beat them by jumping over them and stabbing them in the back a bunch, then it would be like, oh, this person's learned you can't do this anymore. They're just going to throw you on the ground every time you try to do it. And so it was at a certain point, there were some like the orcs with big shields that you couldn't break. At a certain point, it's like, okay, what do I have that I can actually do to this orc anymore?
Well, didn't both those games kind of do the thing where, so you had enemy types, right? Like you had the kind of scrappy ones, tough ones with shields, but then beyond that, they would have different stats that they were weak to or resistant to.
They did, yeah.
And that added like a whole nother layer of...
Oh, yeah. At least in
the ones,
second game.
Yeah, the ones that would scare easily were always... Or the ones that were weak to assassination were the easiest ones to kill.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't even want
shot.
you under my mind control. Like, you're pathetic. Just die.
Yeah, there were so many that I would just like go full Ezio and like leap off of a tower and land on them and they would immediately die. And I'm like,
Yeah. But I think that was what kept me coming back to the game. It still keeps me coming back to the game every now and then, though.
Just those moments.
Those little, like I'll load up the game after months of not playing it. I'll walk into like the nearest little town area and just start fighting orcs. And then like some orc that my character has backstory with because like I defeated them or they killed me or, they defeated one of my lieutenants or something will show up and be like, I'm going to get you. And then like one of my lieutenants is like, nuh-uh, like I'm here.
And that's something that I forgot to mention in the Nemesis system. The lieutenants can butt heads with each other in their army and rank up. So like you can stumble across like a duel where Ratbag is fighting Meat Thrasher or whatever. And they all have ridiculous names.
Yeah.
And, like, you thought you could kill me? And the other one's like, stomp your head. And then, so then they start fighting. And if you want, you can just let them fight. And whoever wins ranks up and becomes harder to kill. Or you can crash it and kill them both or turn them both. So, like, there was...
Or you could kill the one that's against you and let your guy...
Yes, and if one of them was
up.
your lieutenant that you had mind controlled, then you would help them so they could rank up, become more powerful. Because ultimately, you would want to have generals that were mind controlled.
Because that was one of the funnest things to do, especially when you first started playing with that system, was to like control like 4 or 5 captains or whatever, and then go in to kill like one of the big bosses, and then all of his bodyguards come to like. He calls them to help him, but they're all under your control, and they just all start ganking him. Like, that was just so satisfying.
That was satisfying.
It's like all of my groundwork paid off.
Yeah, it's like the Sopranos. And I'll just
it's literally just the Sopranos. Let's talk about the story, and let's intertwine that conversation with the conversation of how this game fits in the greater lore of Lord of the Rings, because that was kind of a hot button issue when the first game came out. People were like, they took it really serious, and they were like, this doesn't seem right, this doesn't fit in, I don't like this, but the game's fun. And then the second one came out, and people, I feel like the general vibe was, okay, so this just isn't even the same universe anymore.
Yeah. 'Cause Lord of the Rings, for better or worse, is one of those that does seem to really have those fans that are like, you deviated. Like, there were people that were upset that Tom Bombadil was not in the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings trilogy. And I don't know who those people are, because
I don't
they
know who
seem
Tom
very
Bombadil
lame.
is.
Yeah, I don't either.
He's basically God.
Oh.
And they spend about 20 chapters of the Fellowship of the Ring just not doing anything, hanging out with Tom Bombadil. I'm probably wrong. If I'm wrong and you really care about this, don't bother writing in, honestly.
No, yeah, definitely right. Tell Dylan how wrong he is.
But there's a not insignificant chunk of book of the Fellowship of the Ring where they're just like chilling in a forest with Tom Bombadil, like doing nothing. And it really added nothing to the story, and it would have been like 4 hours long if they didn't cut something. And so they cut that, and there were people that were upset by it. To me, a lot of the people that were upset by Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War, it's like, all right, guys, let's calm down. Let's chill out here. Because really, I, like you said, Andrew, I think earlier, like I was able to very easily like go through and be like, yeah, no, this is definitely not like a canon story here.
Exactly.
Like this is set in the, like it's leaning heavily on like that I'm familiar with how Lord of the Rings works and the general idea. Like I know Sauron's the bad guy. I know the One Ring exists. I know maybe who Celebrimbor is. I know when I see Gollum, I'm like, hey, it's the guy from the movies. Like,
yeah, I think that's what made the first game's story better than the second. Is it was pretty much inconsequential to the overall story of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah,
because it was just this little like microcosm that happened in Mordor, away from everything else going on.
Yeah,
and it didn't really directly impact.
Yeah, like I think at the end of the game, they delayed Sauron by a few years.
Yeah,
and like that was
exactly.
it. Everything else just still happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Like game 2 really is like, oh, this has like big implications for
Yeah.
It's like, why didn't the eagles fly? You know, it's that kind of level of plot hole with this.
Yeah. So the story overall, you know, with Talion being a ranger who was stationed at the Black Gate.
Yeah.
And then he and his family are brutally murdered in an opening cutscene in the first game that was like, oh,
yeah,
this is The Last of Us.
It did the Red Dead thing where it lets you kind of like wander around and be like, I'm John Marston, I'm a farmer. And then it's like, no, you're not. We're going to kill you and everyone you love.
And so, yeah, after the brutal killing, you come back. You don't fully die, and so that's when you meet up with Celebrim. Is it C? Is it a soft C?
I thought it was Celebrimbor.
Yeah, I think it's Celebrimbor, like with the hard C.
So you meet up with him in like the purgatory, essentially.
Yeah.
And you guys decide to team up to get revenge. And, you know, obviously, later on you find out that Celebrimbor has kind of ulterior motives, but at the beginning, you just are both mad at Mordor.
He's like,
and
hey,
Sauron.
can I inhabit your meat suit with you?
And
you're
so
like,
he gives you ethereal powers, which are, you know, really
the
handy.
Assassin's Creed abilities,
Yeah.
basically.
So
Yeah. It also is like their nice little explanation for like, you can't die, you just come back.
right. And I feel like that's pretty much all you need for the first game. Like there are other, like there's side characters and other things that happen, but it's like dude dies, his family's killed, he comes back with supernatural powers, and he
Gets
tries
revenge.
to wreck the people that wronged him.
Yeah, like there were 3 main dudes that like killed his family. And so the goal of the first game is like track down and kill those 3 dudes.
Yeah, wasn't it like the hand of Sauron, the what were the 3?
The hammer, the tower, and the hand of Sauron.
But then the second game kind of decided to get a little bit more wild. You had more side characters. You had the Nazgul involved. You had Shelob as a sexy woman.
I mean, I'm okay with that change. Well, and they also like explained in the movies we had seen Cirithungol and everything, and this was like, hey, this is how it became Cirithungol.
That kind of stuff I thought was cool. Like that was a cool interpretation of that kind of stuff. But then I feel like they took everything like a half step too far in the second game for me. I mean, like we said, it's kind of alternate reality type thing, but with them treating it as serious as they did, and them being as like serious about their game as they were, I felt like they could have just maybe dialed things back just a little bit, and it had more impact or been more like, oh, okay, I can see how this actually relates to or fits in with the wider universe, but they kind of went that extra little bit too far to make it be like, okay, this is full on alternate reality, non-canon, like just enjoy killing orcs because the story doesn't matter.
Yeah, because it was very much because the first game, like we said, was they managed to delay Sauron like slightly. The second game was like, no, there's like this guy, he's raised an orc army that's fighting within Mordor to like delay Sauron's fighting a civil war basically, and it's like that's a bit much. That's a bit. Plus just like the implications of like, oh, so we could just like forge more One Rings, like,
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Well, we need one more ring, so let's just make one.
Yeah.
That was one of the things where I was like, okay, this is kind of a step too far. But then that ring was kind of crucial to the whole story they were telling, because Talion would just be a dead, rotting corpse without it. So.
Yeah. And it is very like, with some slight changes, it's like, okay, let's just not call it another One Ring. Like, let's call it a Ring of Power or something that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But overall, I thought it was a very cool, like, little story. But yeah,
I thought it was fun. It was like a fun roller coaster ride. Like, I enjoyed the game and the story, but I also in the back of my mind was like, none of this happened.
Yeah, it reminded me a whole lot of that Lord of the Rings, The Third Age, where it was like, oh, so there's another party of a man, an elf, and a dwarf, and whatever that's following along in the footsteps of the Fellowship, doing all the. Oh, and they fought the Eye of Sauron during like the end of the third movie. It was very much that, where it's just like, oh, okay, so this isn't real. Like
exactly.
this is not canon. This is just a fun little like, I'm in this world, which is all I really wanted. You know?
Exactly. Braedon, you have any other thoughts on the story before we?
No, I think it was wrapped up succinctly.
Yeah. I will say at the end of Shadow of War, to like finish the story, initially you had to do the Shadow Wars.
Yeah, which is where I stopped.
Yeah. So the Shadow Wars are essentially just that piece of the game that is doing the Civil War piece, where you're trying to take over all of the different like areas of Mordor and defend them. And then like, so you have to do a bunch of defense missions, and then Sauron's armies will strike back and you'll have to like retake citadels and that sort of thing. And there was, I forget if it was like 7 or like 15 steps to that, where it was a lot of just.
That's what killed me in the first part of the game when you're in Minas Ithil, right? Yeah. Before it becomes Minas Morgul.
Yeah.
It just felt the repetition was getting to me. Like, I think the story had been stretched a little too far for how much you had to do. Like, I feel like I ran into the city, saved a bunch of guards, killed a bunch of orcs, like 40 times.
Yeah.
Before anything actually started to move forward. And it just like, it kind of became a grind that I wasn't enjoying.
Yeah, the end game was very grindy too, like what Dylan's talking about.
Yeah, and it was, there were a lot of like steps to it, a lot of like, and so eventually they changed around the time where they took out the microtransactions. They also took out the grindy end game,
and that I think made that was a something that caused the Nemesis system to have more negative traits, because then you're like, okay, I have to run across this entire map to go do this side mission to kill these ghouls or whatever and get this thing. And you couldn't make it 30 feet without being interrupted by warrior, man. And there's some lieutenant yelling at you because they saw you, and now you got to fight them. And like, it just, so you're always being interrupted by some orc that recognized you that you had fought before. And it just like got... So then you either had to do that, or you had to parkour your way across the map, which took forever.
Yeah. Or you could get a dragon and fly across the map, because they added that too.
Far enough to get a dragon.
Yep. But yeah, so the end game though was a bit kind of meh initially. Having played through it now, it's a lot better.
Yeah, I want to replay it now that you mentioned that, because I had forgotten that they did that they changed how that ending played out.
What did they call you? They would always call you something when they recognize you. They call you like...
the Grave Walker.
Yeah, that's what it was, Grave Walker.
Yeah, or Ranger, or Man Swine. So, But yeah, and then there were 2 DLCs for it as well.
That's where I was headed next. I saw you put that in there. You wanted to. I played the DLC for the first game. I played the Hunter, which was kind of just literally like a side thing that really didn't matter too much. And then they had one. Didn't they have one where you played as a different character?
I don't remember because I initially played it on 360 and the DLC never came out for 360.
I think in the first one you played as the girl.
There was an elf girl. I know there's an elf girl in Shadow of War that you play.
I might be mixing them up. I feel like you played as a different character. Maybe you played as Celebrimbor as a like person
back in the day or something.
I feel like there was something like that in the first. I played both of the DLC packs in the first game for sure because I went back to like the Game of the Year edition when I was like that sounds like a fun thing to do, and then I don't know if they gave it away or what, but I went back into that game. The achievements were fresh, and so I was like, hey, more achievements. I'll play this game again. And I did. I played the DLCs and I enjoyed them, but obviously as I'm sitting here trying to remember what they weren't like crucial content in the first game. They were just more of, if you liked this, here's more of it. The second game, I feel like they went a little bit more
more in depth
with it.
Because during the course of the first game, you run into an elf assassin. I'm gonna look her name up.
I know she works
Eltariel?
For Gladriel, which is dope.
And so one of the stories of the DLC followed her, and so she basically takes the ring at some point from Talion, or I guess it was after the end of Shadow of War. She picks up the ring and becomes the new Talion, basically.
Right.
And so she fights during the Civil War in Mordor as well. And I have not played all the way through that DLC.
I think I played that one. I think it was in the first game there was a Celebrimbor thing that you did, and the second one you played as her, and that's what I'm thinking about. Yeah, and then the other one, there was another character named Baranor, who was one of the Gondorians, and that one was more of like a roguelite type of game because he didn't have a ring of power. He could not come, if you died with him, you had to start over, which was kind of cool. It made it a lot more intense to... it was kind of a breath of fresh air after getting to the point where you're just killing everything as Talion. You go in and you're like, oh, I can't die. I'm just a man here. But it did have some cool aspects to it too, because I think he could have a Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild flight sort of thing, like a glider if you got far enough into it. But it was interesting. Both of those actually had more story impact, I want to say. Yeah, I remember I really remember playing as the elf. I feel like I played a little bit as the man. Yeah, Baranor. I knew it started with a B. But I don't remember that much of his, but I do remember liking the DLC. I feel like Monolith, they did a good job with their DLCs. And at this point, the games are so cheap or available wherever that the DLC usually comes with them, so it's worth playing. Yeah, it's they'll sell the base game for $10, or you can get the one that comes with all the DLC for $12 or something. Exactly. So at this point, it's the DLCs, at least for Shadow of War, are good enough that you might as well just get the whole complete edition. And I don't know that they sell Shadow of Mordor by itself. I think it just comes as the game of the year edition. Yeah,
I don't think I played the DLCs.
Yeah, like I said, I feel like in the first game they're fun, but they're not really anything to write home about. But the second game, I think they stepped it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Do you guys have anything else you want to wrap up overall on the game or the game series before we go into our grading?
If they make a third one, I'll probably play it.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it ended up being grindy like the second game, I don't know if I would stick with it.
Yeah, and I feel like at this point, if they make another, it probably won't be a continuation of Talion's story. But
that's what I was going to say.
I would definitely be down to play another game in the Lord of the Rings Middle Earth setting.
Mm-hmm. I would love another Shadow of War or Shadow of game that explored someone else's story.
Yeah,
I would
like
love to be a Rohirrim. That would be a dope.
Yeah, like Shadow of Rohan or like Shadow of Angmar or something, where you play as like a ranger in the north.
Yeah.
During all those events.
Or, yeah, even if they don't want to do the Shadow of series, just do a Lord of the Rings game, where you play as some other ranger or some other person in the world. Because, I mean, I'm sure I don't have to tell anybody listening to this podcast that the world of the Lord of the Rings is just, like, rich and ripe for potential games and stories and side stories and things that they could do. So, yeah, it would be really cool to just get more polished, fun, well-made games within that universe.
Yes.
Nice. Well, let's move into our kind of grading for, I guess let's do the series as a whole, taking into consideration our opinions on both games. So the way we grade games for the F in gamers is S is a masterpiece. S is the pinnacle, the top, the best you can get. And then beyond that, it goes A through F, and those are what you would expect. So, Dylan, let's throw it your way, because I know you're probably the closest to a super fan on the panel today for this series.
Are we rating both games?
Yeah, do it as a series, but you can explain like which one weighted your grade.
I feel like it's going to, as a series as a whole, I think it's an A. I think it's an A for me. I think it's they're fun games. They're very enjoyable to play. I have a lot of fun with them. I don't feel like they're necessarily like, the greatest games I've ever played that would bump it up into that S tier. But I think overall they're like very solid, fun games that like I still enjoy going back to. And after talking about them today, we'll probably go back to some more. And I feel like I would give both of the games an A as well, like just individually. I think Shadow of Mordor was really fun, and especially taken in context of like it's the older version, like the older game. Like at the time that it came out, I think it definitely deserved the A. Comparing the two now, it's like, I probably would enjoy Shadow of War more at this point, with like just some of the improvements and quality of life stuff. But I think both of them for me deserve the A. And
nice. Braedon?
Series as a whole, I'd put it at a solid B. I think Shadow of Mordor is also A quality, but from my experience, Shadow of War lands in a low B, high C probably.
Yeah.
So that averages out to a B. And I think it's also lower for me personally, just because unlike you guys, I still don't really have a desire to go back and play it after talking about it.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed the first game, but I don't know if I'll ever play it again, just because there's other games to play. And I've played it now. And it, definitely isn't a high A or S tier for me, because that's reserved for games like The Witcher.
Couldn't go to full episode without bringing it up.
Gotta have it. Yep. I'm
definitely with you guys where the first game was A material. That game was just so addicting and so fun to me. Where I'm struggling is trying to decide where I want to put the second game, because I had a ton of fun with it moment to moment, and I loved all of the gameplay improvements, and I liked the sieges and the dragons and that kind of stuff. But I do agree that the story kind of was a little ridiculous, and also like some of the things Braedon brought up about, trying to cross the map, you were just interrupted constantly by your nemesis. But I still think I would give that game a B. I think that like moment to moment, I had a lot of fun with it. It still fulfilled that power fantasy, and I thought that the gameplay improvements made the experience like they outweighed the narrative faults. So I guess that what is that? Where does that put me? Like a B plus, A minus? That's kind of where I'm at, is like a low A, high B for the series.
Yeah, with Shadow of War, when you weren't in the slog, it was a good game. But the slog was a high percentage of the overall time spent in the game, which I think is why I ultimately ended up.
There were also some crazy like moments and set pieces in Shadow of War with like there was like a Balrog fight and some other stuff like that happened that was just back to that kind of Lord of the Rings fan power fantasy where it's like, yeah, this doesn't make any sense narratively, but I am having so much fun in this moment. So it just had a lot of those cool aspects to it. So I'm in that B plus A minus range. I think I definitely think that if you have not played these games and for some reason you listen to this whole episode up to this point, find these games on sale, find them on Game Pass, whatever, give them a shot. Especially if you enjoy Assassin's Creed or the Batman games or Mad Max or any of those like kind of action open world games, and if you like Lord of the Rings, for sure, good time. So with that, we want to move into our closing segment. So the game that we're going to be playing on this episode, I should mention, our closing segment for this episode is a game because we have Braedon here, so we have enough people to do a game.
We do.
I went pretty simple. I tried to keep it on brand for this one. So what
doing a thumb war?
A thumb war, exactly.
Yeah.
You got it.
Player thumb war.
It's gonna translate great to the audio format
exactly.
of this podcast.
Look, okay. So Metacritic. It's a website that aggregates review scores. I'm sure you've heard of it.
Yes.
Never.
Well, they also do user scores. So I'm going to list 2 games.
Was this like The Price is Right?
No.
Oh.
I'm going to list
for the future.
2 games, and you guys are going to have to tell me which of those 2 games has the higher user score, which you believe has the higher user score.
The mind of a user, Dylan.
Exactly. Yep. And then whoever gets it correct gets the point. Now, this isn't one of those things where I give you bonus points for guessing the theme because the theme is Lord of the Rings. So we're going to be doing Lord of the Rings games, and then I have a few movie sets as well just to kind of pad out how many comparisons we have. So you guys you're good on the rules? You understand what we're doing here?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, so the first 2 games, Shadow of Mordor and Return of the King.
Like the GameCube, Xbox,
right?
PlayStation
So
era.
the way Metacritic works is there's different review values for each SKU, but I just picked one.
Okay.
And so that's the score I went with. So
gotcha.
But yes, that era of Return of the King.
Return of the King, final answer.
You said Shadow of Mordor or Shadow
of Mordor, Return of the King.
Shadow of Mordor. Because Shadow of Mordor definitely won a Game of the Year.
It did win Game of the Year, you're right.
And Return of the King definitely did not win Game of the Year.
You want to hear my logic, which might be flawed logic? I think in the modern era, people are way more critical of everything because they feel like their opinion matters more when it doesn't. And back in the day,
before Metacritic existed,
were way less critical. They're like, oh, I had fun playing this game. It's a 10. It wasn't like, well, the game design was flawed because the character meshes
the source material.
Yeah, exactly. So that was my logic.
I do think that you are probably going to be right because I think Metacritic came into existence after Lord of the Rings Return of the King, which means that anyone who's going back to give a user score to Return of the King is going in amazing. As I loved this game as a kid.
Yeah.
So I assume that that's actually going to be right, but I have to go with Shadow of Mordor.
Okay, so Return of the King has an 8.6.
Shadow of Mordor is going to be higher than that.
Shadow of Mordor.
It's going to be like a 7 something.
8.0.
Oh, really?
Oh,
wow.
So closer than you thought, but yes, Braedon gets that point.
Yep.
Next we have Lord of the Rings. Most of these are Lord of the Rings. War in the North.
Okay.
Versus Lord of the Rings Conquest.
I don't know what either of those games are.
So War in the North was it was trying to be sort of similar to a Return of the King-esque type of game.
Like a hack and slash. Dynasty Warriors kind of.
Yeah.
You versus thousands.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lord of the Rings Conquest was basic. It was made by the people who made Star Wars Battlefront 1 and 2 back in the day. the originals,
Mm-hmm.
and they made a Lord of the Rings version of that.
I'm going to go Lord of the Rings Conquest then, just based on that knowledge.
Yeah.
Because I think anyone trying to do an imitation of The Return of the King would do it poorly.
Yeah,
And it wouldn't have been taken as well.
I'm also going to go with Lord of the Rings Conquest because I own both of those games. And there's a point that I can't get past in Lord of the Rings War in the North because every time I try, the game glitches and I'm not able to beat the final boss of a level. And I can't get past a certain level in that game. So I'm going to go with Lord of the Rings Conquest.
Critical flaw, yeah.
So you're both going Conquest.
Yeah.
Yes.
Conquest has a 6.6
Yeah, neither is going to be great.
user score. War in the North has a 7.2.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, so you guys both whiffed on that
those
one.
first 3 levels must really be great.
I love it. Salty Dylan's coming out to play.
I mean, it is what I've played of that game is fun.
Right.
It just is. It's kind of a bummer. You know what game
it on?
It's on the 360.
360.
Yeah. It reminds me a lot of the Legend of Drizzt game that came out. The D&D game.
Just
That's
now?
hack and slash.
Recently?
Yeah.
Dark Alliance?
Dark Alliance. Yeah. It was made by the people who made the original Dark Alliance back in the day. And that's what War in the North
I
is.
downloaded Dark Alliance and I haven't launched it.
You're going to love it.
I've heard that it's not great.
Yeah. If you play
I was ooh, a D&D video game. That's exciting.
If we played it together, it would probably be okay. Because
even if it sucked, we'd have fun making fun of it.
If you play it by yourself, it's terrible.
Okay,
so.
fair enough.
So the next one I have is Lord of the Rings Battle for Middle-earth 2.
That one wins.
And Third Age.
I don't know
Keeping
either
my
of those
answer.
two either.
Battle for Middle-earth was like the Lord of the Rings RTS series. And so Battle for Middle-earth 2 is generally put up there in
it's like the
lists.
StarCraft 2.
It's lists of like best RTSs. It sometimes winds up in like those lists.
Okay. And what was the other one?
Third Age.
Third Age was a Final Fantasy ripoff of Lord of the Rings, where it was like a turn-based RPG, and you followed the path of the Fellowship.
Yeah, I'm going with the RTS one.
Which it was really fun.
I was going to say, Dylan and I had some fun nights playing that back when we were babies.
Yeah, like 12, 13.
Yeah.
It was a fun game, but yeah. Battle for Middle-earth 2, I think, is definitely...
You're both going with the same one? Okay. So Battle for Middle-earth has a 7.8.
Wait, Battle for Middle-earth 1?
Battle for Middle-earth 2 has a 7.8 user score.
Yeah.
Third Age.
Oh, wait. Third Age definitely came out before
Is it
Metacritic.
one of those?
It's probably going to be one of those.
8.0. Very close. Very close to each other. I mean, 0.2.
It's almost like you curated it to be like that.
Makes it more I mean,
crazy.
The last one we did was 6.6 versus 7.2, which is...
now that I think about it, as long as I just choose whatever Dylan chooses, I'm going to win. Because I have a lead. Not to metagame this.
So I guess you should go first next time.
Sure. I won't know what either of the games are, but yeah.
No, you won't. First. Neither of these you will know. So the next game
is one of them Guardians of Middle-earth.
You got to give me like a minute to Google the games so I can
I can probably explain to you which ones they are.
I don't think I put that on there at all. But the next one we have Lord of the Rings Tactics versus Lord of the Ring Aragorn's Quest.
Do you know either of those?
I mean, Tactics.
Yeah, he does, but
I don't know Aragorn's Quest.
I've heard the name. I really don't know anything about it.
Can we get a blurb? Give us a blurb for Aragorn's Quest.
I didn't write down a blurb.
Assuming Aragorn goes on a quest.
Aragorn, yeah.
Lord of the Rings Aragorn's Quest.
What did it release on? What generation?
It was on the Wii, Nintendo DS, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, and PlayStation Portable.
I will tell you that I
can't scroll down because if I scroll down anymore, it's going to show me the Metacritic scores.
I did not pull the Wii score, I can tell you that. Because I saw that and I was like, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, I'd say the Wii is always going to...
I think it was just like an action game.
This came out in 2010, which is kind of surprising.
Oh, yeah, Wii.
And it adapts the film trilogy set 15 years after the War of the Ring. So I guess it features Samwise Gamgee telling his children the adventures of Aragorn during the conflict. So basically it's Sam telling the stories of
And you get to be Aragorn.
And the game was aimed primarily at younger players, offering a simplified and less violent version of the plots of the 3 films.
Oh, there you go.
Oh.
So you got that versus Tactics, which is kind of self-explanatory.
Yeah.
A tactics game.
Though? Is it like another RTS?
Like an XCOM.
Yeah, kind of a turn-based strategy game. Like,
All right. So I'm going to go with Aragorn's Quest on this one. And hear me out. All right.
I'm hearing.
It's purposefully dumbed down for younger audiences.
Yeah.
Right? Therefore, the majority of the reviews are going to come from parents or grandparents.
Classic Metacritic users. Yeah.
They are, yeah, right. Fair. Anyways.
beside the point.
Yeah. So their criteria is basically
different.
Going to be,
It's like, oh, my
was
kid
little
can play
Timmy
this.
happy playing this?
Okay.
5 stars. That's it.
Okay.
They're not like, well, the set design was poor because in actuality, you know, it's
Right, yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be like,
Good use of actuality.
Yeah, thank you. So, you know, Schmitty really loved slicing up the orcs. So,
So
here's
you're
a 5.
going with Aragorn's Quest.
Aragorn's Quest, yeah.
Dylan.
I am going to go with Lord of the Rings Tactics based on the fact that Lord of the Rings Tactics came out in the very early 2000s, which I'm pretty sure is before Metacritic existed. So
he's just
I'm gonna
rolling-
I'm gonna
he's
lean
stealing
on
my logic
strategy,
and rolling
yeah.
with it.
I'm going to lean on the fact that the people who are reviewing this game are the ones that really
Nostalgia.
enjoyed Lord, and like people tend to like tactics games in general.
That's fair. That's fair.
So Lord of the Rings Tactics got an 8.1.
Ooh. Yeah, I'm not feeling,
You're not feeling too
I'm not thinking
confident?
Aragorn's Quest cracked 7s on that.
Aragorn's Quest is a 6.1.
Yeah, okay.
Aragorn's
Fair.
Quest is the one that the kids are now going back and reviewing and being like,
This-
my mom wouldn't let me have the cool Lord of the Rings game.
Yeah,
I had
right.
to deal with this.
That
Fair enough,
and
fair
that
enough.
wasn't the Wii version. I feel like that was like a 5.5 or something.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
All right, next we have Battle of the Juggernauts here. We've got Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers, based on the movie, versus Lego Lord of the Rings. So Two Towers is like the Return of the King game. It's just
Just
older.
just based on the second movie.
Okay.
Still the like you play as the party, you hack and
Yeah.
slash your way through levels from the movie. Like we all loved those games as kids.
This is tough. This is a tough one, Dylan.
I don't think it is.
Really?
No.
You're going to use the
I'm
same
gonna-
logic? Two Towers?
I think Two Towers, a game that came out in, 2002, 2003?
Yeah, that's true. There are
Didn't
a
the
lot
first movie come out in 01?
Mhm.
but aren't
Or 99, maybe.
the majority of the Lego anything games
I had it on
are
VHS.
pretty... I don't know.
I mean-
could see it being both.
I think the
So
Lego
what's
games
the score
are
right now? You guys are tied.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Lego games
And Braden
typically...
picked first last time.
Lego games do well.
Yeah, they typically
Um,
do well. They average probably 7s or 8s, I would
Yeah.
think.
And I think in general people like the Lego games.
Yeah. But you're thinking the nostalgia is going to outweigh...
I'm thinking that the people who are rating Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers are the people who thought Two Towers was a 10 out of 10 game when they played it as children.
Right.
Versus Lord of the Rings Plus,
Plus, you know, there's been like 40 Lego games. So
well, and didn't they not finish one of the Lego series?
The
of-
Hobbit
Okay.
series, yeah. They
Okay.
didn't finish the Hobbit series.
yeah, I think I will. I think I'll go Two Towers.
So you guys are both picking Two
Yeah, I
Towers.
think I'll go Two
Yeah,
Towers
so we
on
can
this one.
finish this game as a tie.
A little anticlimactic. The Two Towers, 8.1.
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings, or Lego Lord of the Rings, 8.0.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's close.
Very close.
Very
Yeah,
close.
those two are very close.
But the logic prevails. That is.
All right, and now the final game. We have the movies after this, but the final game in the list, the set of games, we have Shadow of War versus Lord of the Rings: The Fellowship of the Ring. Not based on the movies.
No.
This game was based on the books.
Yes.
The only time, my only experience with it is watching Dylan play like the
PC version.
the PC version, and specifically where Aragorn put dummies in the Hobbit's bed in the tavern so that the Nazgul would kill the dummies and not the hobbits, and they
Yeah.
like made their escape. Like I remember vividly like that scene in that game. And it was kind of like that surrounding mission that I watched him play. But yeah, they didn't look like the movie characters.
No.
It was a very much a separate thing.
Yeah.
So that game versus Shadow of War. User scores. Dylan, you guessed first last time, so Braden, I'm going to make you pick first this time.
The logic has prevailed so far, but with it not being based on the movies, I feel like it. But then again, it probably reached a much narrower audience, right?
I mean, it came out at the same time as the Fellowship of the Ring movie.
Oh, okay. But then people played it and were like, "Wait, this isn't Viggo Mortensen."
But this was a time when like video games were much simpler too.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go.
I was playing
Shadow
it on
of
my
War.
CRT monitor.
Yeah,
So you're going Shadow of War?
Shadow of War.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dylan?
I'm going to go with the Fellowship of the Ring based on the logic that anyone who's going back and reviewing a game that was released in
Leaning on the
2001
logic.
Leaning on the logic.
Which is fair.
is someone who thinks about it favorably. I doubt there's anyone who's like, this was a terrible game, and 20 years later, I'm still angry about it, so I'm going to look it up on Metacritic and review it poorly.
People on Reddit will surprise you.
Reddit gonna Reddit.
That's
Yeah.
true.
Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring.
Plus the loot box controversy for War probably did.
Yeah, I'm not thinking War has great reviews. I just think it's higher.
Yeah.
Fellowship of the Ring, 4.7.
That is a lot lower than I thought it was going to be.
Shadow of War is probably like a 5.0 or something.
Shadow of War, 4.6.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's low.
they were pissed.
Man,
I feel
it
like
must
that
have
game
been-
got
It's
review
still-
bombed.
Yeah, that's fair.
It did, and no one has gone back.
Yeah, no
and
one's gone back
re-rated
to
it.
fix it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's literally 0.1 below
It's like
Fellowship of the Ring.
what was that game where you would explore space and it came
No
out?
Man's Sky.
Yeah, No
Yep.
Man's Sky. It's like that.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, that's why I picked those
Which is
two, because
apparently
they
a
were
great
so
game.
It
close
is
and
now.
low.
It is.
But so yeah, that one went to Dylan.
Yes, it did.
So now he's got the lead.
So,
I'm not keeping score. Sorry. It's 2-1.
He knows.
okay. So Dylan 2, Braden 1. We're going into movies now. I have 3 sets of movies.
It's higher, but I'm just I'm keeping score as like if we tie, I'm not giving us points.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
right.
it's just,
no.
yeah. That's how I've been doing it.
So the first set of movies, Two Towers versus The Return of the King. And just in case someone wants to be silly or pedantic, these are like
The Peter Jackson versions.
trilogies. I'm not talking about the animated.
When there's a whip, there's a way. Classic.
Like how you sang that as like a gospel song.
That's how they sing it in the movie. I
It
don't know if
is.
you've seen it, but it's like the goofiest.
It's very fuzzy memories. In
Yeah,
my
the
mind,
orcs sound like the tabernacle choirs. Yeah. Okay, so this is user or like viewer reviews, right? Not critical
Right.
reviews.
These are the user reviews.
I'm going Two Towers on this one.
Okay. Return of the King. Too many endings.
Too long. Two
Like-
Towers was like
But
the
such a great culmination.
Two Towers
Yeah.
was the action.
So this is like the struggle. Is like I personally like Two Towers better.
Yeah.
However,
Don't tell the elf.
I feel like Return of the King.
Would you like me to get?
I
you a
mean, it
box?
did win Oscars, so
Yeah, but that's critical acclaim.
that's critical
That's
acclaim.
not viewers.
But also, I feel like it is. I mean, the series itself is
I feel like-
basically universally loved.
Right.
So
I feel like of the 3 movies, the Two Towers is
Yeah.
the best.
I'm going to make it interesting. I am going to say Return of the King.
All right. Two Towers, 9.0.
That seems appropriate.
Return of the King's gonna be like a 9.2 or something, isn't it?
Return of the King,
Yeah, he's smiling at me.
9.1.
Yeah, figured. I knew. Yeah,
So close.
I knew they would be close.
And that's why I picked him. All right. Next, we have The Fellowship of the Ring, Peter
Okay.
Jackson, versus The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey, which is the first Hobbit movie in the new
Yeah.
Hobbit movies.
Because that one, I guess the struggle there is like the first Hobbit movie,
Yeah,
in general, people.
We were
Yeah.
on board. We
We're
were
on
we
board
were
with
like,
it.
this is good hit of nostalgia.
Yeah.
We like the characters. We like being back in this world. It's a little long. They're really going to make 3 of these, but this is fine.
So my question is, how many people then went back after
Afterwards, and we're like,
and
this
we're like,
trilogy
this is terrible.
sucks.
I'm going to
Yeah.
rate every movie badly.
I'm going Fellowship of the Ring on this one.
I'll go Unexpected Journey because
right.
Fellowship came out before Benedict. So by my own logic, I should go with it.
That's my logic. What are you talking about?
What's the score?
It's 3 to 1.
Okay.
So I have the wiggle
So
room.
you could,
So
yeah,
I'll go Unexpected
Yeah.
Journey.
All right, to keep it interesting. So the Hobbit, Unexpected Journey, 8.0.
That feels
not
Fellowship of the
probably
Ring
a
is
little
gonna be
bit
higher than that.
honestly like higher than it should.
I know Fellowship of the Ring is gonna be lower than the other two movies, but I think it's gonna be higher than an 8.
Fellowship of the Ring, 9.1.
Oh,
Tied with Return of the King.
So
better
Two
than
Towers,
Two Towers.
was actually the lowest rated. Okay.
Based on Metacritic by 0.1. Which,
yeah, it's a very narrow margin, but that's still
All right, so going into our final one, Braden can tie it up. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
if he doesn't guess the same thing.
If I
do,
don't guess
yeah.
the
Well,
same
right,
thing,
yeah. If Dylan wants to play it interesting.
It'll depend on how obvious this one is.
Yeah, exactly.
We have The Hobbit, Desolation of Smaug versus
Interesting.
The Hobbit, Battle of Five Armies.
Also interesting.
Oh,
Battle of the Turds.
my instinct is Desolation of Smog. That's my instinct. Just because you have Bumblebee Cabbage Patch voicing the dragon, and you have
I love all of your names for him.
and you have. I feel like there was more hype for Smog than because once like people were like, "Wait, Smog dies in this movie?"
Yeah.
and then there's like, "Wait, there's still another movie?"
Yeah.
And it's like a bunch of poorly CGI
Yeah,
animated dwarves slapping each other in a field. Like it really was not
accurate.
like the Battle of Five Armies was garbage. It was terrible. Easily the worst of the three, in my opinion. I think I'm
So
going
you're going
Desolation of
Smog.
Smog on this one. Yeah.
Dylan.
I mean, I agree with everything Braden just said. I think Desolation of Smog is it.
Yeah.
I'll go Battle of Five
I
Armies.
don't have a
to make-
tiebreaker.
to make it interesting, and because
You
I
can
know
Google
you
a
didn't come
tiebreaker
up
real
with
quick.
a tiebreaker. You could Google the animated.
There you go. The two animated or three.
Okay,
animated.
so Five Armies is a 7.0.
really,
That is honestly
that is a
shocking.
surprisingly high. Yeah.
And Desolation of Smog is a 7.8.
That's also
that-
surprisingly high.
That one feels most accurately rated. I would put all of them in like the 60s, 70s, and Desolation of Smog actually was
I would normalize them all down to like
40.
yeah, like bring them down considerably. Like they're all relative to each other, sure, but like overall, I would put them in like the 50s.
Yeah. Hey, but that song from
That's
the first
true.
movie
Misty
is pretty
Mountains
dope.
Cold is a banger. Yeah.
So since we have a tie, I'm going to deviate from our game that we were playing.
Thumb War.
Yeah. So the way this game, it's still based on Metacritic.
Okay.
But instead of me giving you two choices and you picking the highest, I'm going to give you a category and you pick what you think in that category has the highest. We'll stick with user score, the highest user score on Metacritic. So
And whoever picks the higher one.
yeah, whoever got it correct.
Okay.
So I want you to give me a top RPG or just an RPG. So it has to be a role-playing game. Give me a role-playing game and the platform that you want it on that you think has the highest user rating on Metacritic. Dylan, you give me yours first.
This is tough because normally I would have just said The Witcher 3, but I feel like Cyberpunk has really probably damaged the user scores there.
I don't know. I feel like in a lot of the online sentiment, people were like, "Why couldn't you be as good as The Witcher?"
Yeah.
Like they were more betrayed by.
And then there are others that I want to go with, like Red Dead or God of War, but I don't know if those
Those aren't
technically count in
RPGs.
RPG,
Yeah, no.
even though like God of War is kind of RPG-ish.
Maybe like action, but it's a pretty linear game. Like I'm thinking like I would take TRPGs over
Mhm.
those like, Baldur's Gate or something.
Yeah. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go with Mass Effect 2.
Okay.
Did you say it had to be fantasy RPG or just RPG?
No,
Okay.
RPG.
I'm going to go Mass Effect 2 on Xbox 360.
All right.
I am blanking on RPGs just in general. Ooh, Fallout New Vegas.
That was my other.
On,
that was my backup.
Yeah, I'll go PC. The
All
modability alone of that game. That's definitely probably Fallout 3 was really popular too. Of the those are the two most popular.
Yeah,
but
I feel like Vegas is the one that I constantly hear like held up as the gold standard.
yeah, of the diehard Fallout fans prefer 3.
But
But
New Vegas, 3 was Bethesda. New Vegas was
Obsidian, yeah.
So
but Obsidian honestly did an
they,
amazing job.
I mean, they are RPG like veterans. You said PC?
Yeah.
You guys did some really good choices here. This is going to be a fun one.
Is it a tie again?
So going into the tiebreaker of this, we have Braedon with Fallout New Vegas, Dylan with Mass Effect 2, Dylan Xbox 360, Braedon PC. Mass Effect 2, 8.9. Solid. Fallout New Vegas, 8.8.
Oh.
You guys, you were so close. Like that was, and I didn't look because Metacritic was being so slow. I didn't like scan the other to see.
What's
if, like,
the New Vegas Xbox?
I was gonna say
score?
if
I'm curious.
Braedon had picked Xbox,
Yeah.
but yeah,
I feel like PC would be the highest.
probably.
among them.
I mean, you
think
got
so.
mods and stuff. Let's see.
Yeah, exactly.
8.6 for Xbox. So
Mhm.
yeah. So there you go, Dylan. You took that home, but it was well fought.
Yes.
Even in up to a tiebreaker. So good game by all. With that being
Congrats.
said,
Good game.
yeah,
Congrats to yourself.
congrats to me. Good job getting second place out of two people. Brandon.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, well, with that being said, if you've listened this far, if you've enjoyed this episode, go check us out on social media. We're Your Friendly Neighborhood Gamers over on Instagram. We are F_N_gamers with a Z on Twitter.
We are neighborhood gamers on Twitch.
Correct, that is exactly what we are. And then on YouTube, you can just search Your Friendly Neighborhood Gamers, look for our logo. We're right there. We got lots of stuff going on over there, you know, on social media. Is the best way to keep up with us. If we decide to stream on a random Thursday, you know, we'll post it there. We'll post fun little clips, things like that. And Twitch, great place to come hang out with us, see what we're like, what we're just talking about in the moment. Interact with us like right then and there. We'll be doing first impressions, forcing Dylan to play Sekiro, things like that.
Forcing Andrew to play scary games.
So yeah, if you want to follow us on any of those places, we would greatly appreciate it. And then yeah, any sort of sharing, reviewing, rating, we would greatly appreciate that. Do you guys have anything else you want to say before we wrap this one up?
Yeah, the aliens haven't invaded yet.
That's really going to be an awkward
Yeah.
prediction there.
By the time you hear this, the aliens will have invaded.
All right, thanks for listening, everybody. We hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of the Friendly Neighborhood Gamers podcast. If so, we would greatly appreciate your help in growing the show and the community by giving us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts and any other podcasting app that allows it.
We also have some awesome content on YouTube at Your Friendly Neighborhood Gamers, and we stream on Twitch every Friday night at 7:30 p.m. Central Time at neighborhood_gamers.
We hope to see you there. Thanks again for listening, and remember,
Stay friendly, gamers.
Wait, start over.
1, 2, 3, 4. I declare it.
Thumb, 5, 6, 7, 8. Who will you eliminate? No. All right, here we go. Oh, I'm squirrely. Anchor the. There we go.
Oh,
Slippery.
beer.
Oh, we're slippery. Oh, I got it.
Braden's got that sweaty thumb that gets.
I got it. Oh, what's the countdown? 3 seconds. 1.
We'll go
2
3
Mississippi.
seconds.
Just 1 Mississippi. 1 Mississippi. 2 Mississippi.
Anchor the elbow, Braden.
Damn it, you're right. Ow. Squirrely. 1 Mississippi. 2 Mississippi. Ow.
That wasn't a pin.
You know what? I had you up against your own index finger, bro.
Those elbows down, boys.
1 Mississippi. 1 Mississippi. 2 Mississippi. 1.
Your thumb is so much longer than mine.
2 Mississippi. 3 Mississippi. There it is.
Classic. I feel like Dylan conceded, but it was still good.
Yeah, a little bit. He was intimidated by my long thumb.